I spent 15 years managing inventory at a warehouse that barely kept the lights on. Every crate sorted, every label printed, every SKU optimized to shave seconds off someone else's bonus. My manager told me anyone could do my job. He said it again the day I noticed the forklift brake line fraying. He ignored the report. 3 hours later, I was pinned under 2 tons of metal and collapsing pallets. My last thought was that nobody would remember my name. Then the pain stopped. My chest filled with cold air that tasted like incense and iron. Light burned through my eyelids. I opened my eyes and saw stone ceiling carved with glowing runes. I was lying in the center of a massive golden circle. Robed priests surrounded me, chanting in a language I shouldn't understand but somehow did. Armored nobles stood at the edges, watching with hungry eyes. One priest raised his staff. The summoning is complete. I tried to sit up, my hands pressed against smooth marble that hummed with magic. The light around me pulsed once, then pulled inward like a collapsing star. The light collapsed inward, and my chest slammed into the marble floor. I gasped and tasted cold stone and something metallic that might have been magic. My ears rang. My hands pressed flat against smooth rock that still hummed with leftover energy from whatever just pulled me through. I pushed myself up to my knees. My arms felt wrong, lighter, weaker. I looked down and saw my hands were the same, but the calluses from 15 years of pallet jacks and barcode scanners were gone. My clothes were different too. Rough brown cloth instead of my torn work uniform. No steel-toed boots, just worn leather that barely fit. The priest who spoke before stepped closer. He held a glowing crystal plate in both hands. He pressed it against my chest before I could move. The plate flared white, then dimmed to a dull gray. Text appeared across its surface in glowing letters I could somehow read. Darren Moss, Otherworlder, Class Laborer, Skill Item Sorting. The room went silent for 3 seconds. Then someone laughed. It started with one noble in silver armor near the back, then another, then the whole chamber filled with it. The priest pulled the plate away like it burned him. He turned toward the throne at the far end of the hall. Your Majesty, the summoning has failed. This one is not the hero. The king sat forward. He was younger than I expected. Gold crown, bored eyes. He looked at me the way my old manager used to look at damaged freight. F-rank item sorting? That is a farmer's skill, a child's skill. One of the robed mages near the circle stepped forward. He bowed low. The ritual was perfect, Your Majesty. The circle called for a hero of legendary potential. We do not understand how this one answered instead. The king waved one hand like he was swatting a fly. Then send him away. The dungeon storage chambers need laborers. Let him work off the summoning cost there until we find a use for him, or he dies. Either is acceptable. 2 guards in steel plate moved toward me before I could stand. They grabbed my arms and hauled me upright. Legs barely supported my weight. My head still spun from whatever force dragged me across worlds. I tried to speak, but one guard shoved me toward a side door and my breath left in a rush. Move! They marched me out of the chamber and down a corridor carved from black stone. Torches burned in iron brackets every 10 feet. Air smelled like wet rock and old blood. I heard voices echoing from deeper inside, metal scraping stone. Something roaring far below. The guards did not slow down. They pulled me through 3 more halls, down 2 flights of stairs, and past a checkpoint where another guard in lighter armor checked a ledger and waved us through without looking up. We entered a massive central chamber that opened into the earth like a mouth. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. Stone bridges crisscrossed the open space. Adventurers in mismatched armor hauled carts loaded with weapons, monster parts, glowing potions, and things I did not have names for. Everything moved in chaos. No organization, no labeling. Adventurers shouted at clerks behind wooden counters. Clerks shouted back. Coins changed hands. Loot got dumped into unmarked bins. I saw a pile of swords taller than a man just sitting in the corner near a stack of crates leaking something green. One of the guards pointed toward a narrow side passage. Storage sub-level 3. Report to the dungeon quartermaster. Do not leave your assigned area. Do not touch loot marked for appraisal. Do not speak to adventurers unless they address you first. The other guard let go of my arm. Welcome to the bottom, Otherworlder. They turned and left. I stood there alone in the middle of the noise, my heart hammered against my ribs. My hands still shook. I looked down at my chest, where the priest pressed the status plate. The word F-rank burned in my head like a brand I could not scrub off. I took a breath, then another. My warehouse instincts kicked in without permission. I scanned the chamber, noted the bottleneck near the counters, noted the lack of sorting zones, noted the damaged goods mixed with the intact, noted the absence of any inventory tracking system. 15 years of habit did not care that I was in another world. I walked toward the side passage, my legs steadied. The tunnel sloped downward and the noise faded behind me. Torches gave way to glowing moss that barely lit the walls. The air got colder, wetter. I passed two more workers in brown cloth like mine. He did not look at me. One carried a mop, the other pushed a cart full of broken shields. The passage opened into a wide, low-ceilinged room that smelled like rust and rot. Wooden shelves lined every wall. The floor was covered in piles. Cracked swords, shattered armor pieces, clay potion bottles with no labels, monster bones, torn leather, bent shields, glass shards, cloth scraps, metal chunks I could not identify. Everything dumped together with no system, no order, no separation. A man in stained gray robes sat at a desk near the entrance. He did not look up. "You the new summon?" I nodded before I remembered he was not looking. Scratched something on parchment with a quill that looked like it came from a bird I had never seen. "Your job is to clear space. Sort the trash from the salvage. Salvage goes in the left bins. Trash goes in the carts for disposal. Touch nothing valuable. If you find something that glows or hums or feels warm, report it. Not pocket anything. We check." He finally looked up. His eyes were tired. "You will not last a week." He went back to his parchment. I stood there staring at the piles, at the chaos, at the worst organized storage system I had ever seen. My chest tightened, not from fear, from something else. Something old and angry and sharp. I walked into the room, stepped over a cracked helmet, crouched near the closest pile. My hand reached out without thinking. My fingers touched a piece of rusted metal buried under rotted cloth and monster teeth. The moment my skin made contact, light exploded across my vision. The light exploded across my vision like a flashbang in a dark room. I jerked my hand back, but the glow followed. A translucent blue window snapped open in the air above the rusted metal. Text scrolled across it in sharp white letters. Item, broken short sword fragment. Material, mithril alloy, 87% purity. Origin, Royal Dungeon, floor 14. Condition, corroded. Structural integrity, 12%. Grade, legendary. Separated component 1 of 7. Appraisal value, 8,200 gold, if restored. I stared at the window. My breath caught in my throat. The words did not fade. They hung there like something carved into reality. I blinked twice. The window stayed. I looked down at my hand. My fingers tingled like I had touched a live wire. Rusted metal sat in the pile exactly where it had been. Nothing about it looked valuable. It looked like trash, like something you would throw away without a second thought. I reached out again. This time I touched a cracked clay bottle half buried under monster teeth. Another window appeared. Item, lesser healing potion, expired. Material, spring water base, corrupted. Condition, unsafe for consumption. Grade, common, trash. Appraisal value, 0 gold. I pulled my hand back. The window vanished. I touched a bent shield. Another window. I touched a piece of torn leather. Another window. Every single item I made contact with triggered the same response. Blue light, white text, material, origin, condition, grade, value. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was not item sorting. This was full appraisal. The kind of skill that took guild appraisers years to train. The kind of skill that adventurers paid gold to access. And the system screen back in the throne room labeled it F rank. I stood up too fast and my head spun. I pressed one hand against the nearest shelf to steady myself. Wood was old and damp. My fingers brushed a stack of metal scraps piled on top. 6 windows opened at once. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component 2 of 7. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component 3 of 7. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component 5 of 7. My breath stopped. I looked at the pile, then at the first piece of rusted metal on the floor, then back at the shelf. My warehouse brain kicked in without permission. 7 components. I had found 4 in one spot, 1 on the floor. That left 2 more. I turned and scanned the room, not with my eyes, with 15 years of inventory logic. Separated shipments always got mixed into adjacent zones. I moved toward the next shelf, pulled aside a stack of broken helmets, found a piece of curved metal wedged between 2 crates. Item, broken short sword fragment. Grade, legendary. Separated component 6 of 7. I searched for 3 more minutes, found the last piece buried under a pile of rotted cloth near the back wall. I carried all 7 fragments to the cleanest section of floor I could find, laid them out in a line. The moment the 7th piece touched stone, all 7 windows flared bright gold. New text appeared. Component set complete. Reconstruction available. Legendary grade weapon detected. Estimated market value, 50,000 gold. 50,000 gold, the number burned into my vision. I had no idea what that meant in this world, but the way the system highlighted it told me everything I needed to know. I knelt down and stared at the 7 pieces of rusted scrap. My hands shook. Not from fear, from something sharper, something I had not felt in 15 years. This was not trash. This was a system nobody understood, a supply chain everyone ignored, a foundation made of dismissed details. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The quartermaster stood in the doorway. He looked at me, then at the 7 fragments laid out on the floor. His face did not change. You are supposed to be clearing space, not playing with scrap metal. I opened my mouth to explain, to show him the windows. But when I looked up, the blue screens were gone. I glanced back at the fragments. The glow had vanished. They looked like rust again, like garbage. The quartermaster walked closer. He stopped 3 feet away and stared down at the pieces. What are you doing? I touched the center fragment. The window snapped back open. Gold text. Legendary grade. 50,000 gold. I looked up at him. Can you see this? He frowned. See what? The window hovered between us, bright enough to light his face, but his eyes did not track it. He was looking at me, not at the screen. I pulled my hand back. The window disappeared. The quartermaster's frown deepened. If you are wasting time, I will report it. Get back to work. He turned and walked back toward his desk. I stayed on the floor. My pulse hammered in my ears. He could not see it. The system labeled my skill F rank. The world thought it was trash. But whatever this ability actually was, it was mine alone. I looked back at the fragments. My mind raced. 50,000 gold for something everyone walked past. For something buried in a pile labeled disposal. I thought about the throne room, the nobles laughing, the king calling me a mistake, the priest pulling the status plate away like it was contaminated. I thought about my manager, about 15 years of optimized inventory nobody noticed until it broke, about dying under a collapsed pallet because someone ignored a report. I picked up the first fragment, then the second. I started stacking them carefully in the corner behind a crate where the quartermaster would not see. My hands moved on instinct, sorting, organizing, categorizing, the same motions I had done 10,000 times in another world. Except this time, the system was broken, and I was the only one who could see it. I touched another pile. More windows opened. Most were trash. But 3 items glowed gold. One was a cracked monster core marked rare. One was a bent dagger marked epic. One was a cloth pouch that looked empty, but the window labeled it spatial storage tier 3. I separated them, hid them, kept sorting. My heart would not slow down. The room was still filthy, still chaotic, still full of garbage nobody wanted. But under the rust and rot, I could see something nobody else could. I could see value. I worked for 2 hours. The quartermaster did not check on me again. By the time I stopped, I had identified 16 items worth more than 1,000 gold each. All of them labeled trash. All of them ignored. I sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. My arms ached. My fingers were covered in dust and something sticky I did not want to identify. But my chest felt lighter than it had in years. Then I saw it. A second window. Smaller, tucked in the corner of my vision like a notification I had missed. I focused on it, and the text expanded. System notice. Unregistered skill evolution detected. Classification error logged. Skill rank under review. The window flickered once. Then it vanished. I tried to call it back. Focused. Concentrated. Nothing appeared. I touched the fragment pile again. The normal appraisal window opened. But the second notification was gone. I stared at the empty air where it had been. My skin prickled. Skill rank under review. That meant someone was watching. That meant the system knew something was wrong. I did not know if that was good or bad. I did not know what unregistered meant. I did not know what would happen if the rank changed. But I knew one thing. The world thought I was a mistake. The system labeled me F rank, and somewhere in the code, something had just noticed that did not add up. I stood up, wiped my hands on my rough brown pants, looked at the pile of legendary fragments hidden behind the crate, then at the 16 other items I had separated and cataloged in my head. My old manager used to say anyone could do my job. That I was replaceable. That my work did not matter. I smiled for the first time since the forklift crushed my chest. Maybe he was right. Maybe anyone could have done that job. But nobody else could do this one. I spent the rest of that day sorting. Not because the quartermaster told me to, because my hands would not stop moving. 15 years of muscle memory do not care that you died and woke up in another world. They just go. I separated the piles into categories. Metal scraps in one corner, monster parts in another, broken armor against the left wall, cracked potions near the door where the air moved, clay, glass, leather, bone, cloth. Everything got a zone. Everything got a system. The quartermaster walked past twice and said nothing. He probably thought I was just cleaning faster than expected. But every time I touched something, the blue windows opened. Most items were trash. Real trash. Corroded beyond repair. No value. No potential, I marked those mentally and moved them toward the disposal cart. But every 10th item glowed a different color. Green for uncommon, blue for rare, purple for epic, gold for legendary. I hid those behind crates or under cloth where nobody would see. By the time the shift bell rang, I had identified 23 valuable items buried in garbage. My arms ached. My back screamed. My fingers were numb. I had not eaten since I arrived. I did not care. The next morning, I returned to the storage room before the quartermaster arrived. I needed to test something. I pulled the 7 sword fragments out from behind the crate and laid them on the floor again. The system window appeared. Component set complete. Reconstruction available. I stared at the text. Reconstruction available. That meant the system could do more than just identify. It could guide. I focused on the words and a new prompt appeared. Initiate reconstruction? Warning, requires basic smithing knowledge. I did not have smithing knowledge. I had inventory logic. But inventory logic said separated components only worked when aligned correctly. I picked up the first fragment, rotated it slowly. The system window highlighted one edge in gold. I picked up the second fragment. Another edge glowed. I pressed them together. The metal hummed. Heat flared under my palms. The 2 pieces fused with a sound like grinding glass. The rust flaked away. Underneath, the metal was silver blue and flawless. I did not stop. I grabbed the 3rd piece. The 4th. The system guided every connection, highlighted every contact point. My hands shook from the heat, but I kept going. 7 minutes later, I held a complete short sword. The blade was 30 inches long, perfectly balanced. The edge caught the torchlight and reflected it like a mirror. New window appeared. Item Stormwarden Blade. Grade Legendary. Material Mithril Alloy. 98% purity. Appraisal value 52,000 gold. 1,000 gold. The number burned into my vision. I had no idea what I could buy with that. But I knew what it meant. It meant I was holding more money than the king spent to summon me. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel. I shoved the sword under a pile of cloth and stood up. Tobias the janitor walked in pushing his cart. He was older than me, maybe 50, thin, tired eyes. He glanced at me and kept walking toward the mop bucket in the corner. You are the new summon. I nodded. Yeah. He filled his bucket from a barrel near the back wall. Quartermaster says you work fast. That is stupid. Work slow. Stay quiet. Do not get noticed. He left before I could respond. I waited until his footsteps faded. Then I pulled the sword back out, my heart hammered. I needed to move it. Hiding it here was too risky. But I had no access to the upper levels. No merchant contacts. No idea how to sell something this valuable without getting robbed or reported. I wrapped the blade in cloth and tucked it under my shirt. The metal pressed cold against my ribs. I walked out of the storage room and into the main dungeon hub. The chaos was worse than yesterday. Adventurers shouted. Clerks slammed ledgers. Coins spilled across counters. I kept my head down and moved toward the side exit. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I turned. A man in dark leather armor stood behind me. No guild markings, no rank insignia. His eyes flicked toward my chest, where the sword pressed against cloth. You looking to sell something? I froze. He smiled. Relax. I buy things the guild does not want to log. Fair prices? No questions. I should have walked away. I should have said no. But 52,000 gold was sitting against my ribs, and I had been in this world for 2 days with no money and no plan. How much for a legendary grade sword? His smile widened. Depends on the sword. I pulled the cloth back just enough for him to see the blade. His expression did not change, but his pupils dilated. 30,000 gold. Right now. The system window said, countered, 45. He laughed. 35. Final offer. You try to sell that through official channels and the guild takes half. Then they ask where you got it. Then you disappear. I thought about the throne room. The king calling me a mistake. The nobles laughing. I thought about the quartermaster saying I would not last a week. Deal. The merchant pulled a small leather pouch from his belt. He opened it, and the inside glowed faintly. Spatial storage. He reached in and pulled out a stack of gold coins that should not have fit. He counted them onto a crate. 35 stacks. 1,000 gold each. The sword. I handed it over. He wrapped it carefully and tucked it into the pouch. The whole transaction took less than 2 minutes. He walked away without another word. I stared at the gold. My hands trembled. I had just sold reassembled trash for more money than I earned in a year at the warehouse. I loaded the coins into a sack I borrowed from the disposal cart. The weight almost pulled my arm out of socket. I dragged it back toward the storage room. My chest felt tight. Not from fear, from something sharper. Something that tasted like victory. Tobias was waiting inside. He stood near the door with his mop in one hand. His eyes locked onto the sack. What did you do? I dropped the sack near the crate. My job. His face went pale. If the quartermaster sees that, you are dead. If Lord Valen hears you sold dungeon loot without guild clearance, you are worse than dead. I looked at him. He was shaking, but he had not run. He had not reported me. He was just standing there holding a mop like it was a weapon. You going to tell them? He stared at me for 5 long seconds. Then he laughed. It sounded broken. No, I have been cleaning dungeon floors for 3 years. Nobody notices me either. He set the mop down and walked closer. What else can you find in this trash? I smiled. Everything. We worked together for the next 4 days. I sorted. He hauled. I identified. He hid. My skill revealed that 30% of the disposal pile was misappraised loot. Rare monster cores labeled as common. Epic daggers marked as scrap. Cursed rings that could be cleansed with basic purification magic. I separated everything. Cataloged it in my head using the same SKU system I used at the warehouse. Tobias knew a second black market merchant, then a third. We sold 12 items in 6 days. Total take 68,000 gold. We split it 60-40. My share sat in a spatial pouch Tobias bought for me with his first cut, but my body started breaking. Every time I used the appraisal skill for more than an hour, my head throbbed. My vision blurred at the edges. My hands shook so hard I had to sit down. The system never warned me. Never showed a cooldown timer, it just drained me. On the 7th day, I touched a cracked monster core and my nose started bleeding. The blood hit the floor in thick drops. Tobias saw and dragged me toward the water barrel. You need to stop. I wiped my face. I am fine. You are bleeding from your brain. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking again. The blue windows flickered at the edges of my vision, even when I was not touching anything. I blinked hard. The flicker stopped. I ignored him and went back to sorting. That afternoon, I found something that made my chest tighten. A small black gemstone buried under a pile of rotted cloth. The moment I touched it, the system window appeared. The black gemstone I had hidden days earlier pulsed inside my spatial pouch, beating in the same rhythm as the sphere. Item Dungeon Core Fragment. Grade Mythic. Origin Floor. 28 Royal Dungeon. Condition Dormant. Appraisal value 150,000 gold. Mythic. I had not seen that grade before. I turned the gemstone over in my palm. It was warm. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Then the second window appeared. The small one. The one I saw once before. It flickered in the corner of my vision. System notice skill rank adjustment processing. My stomach dropped. I tried to focus on the text, but it vanished before I could read the rest. I stared at the empty air. Skill rank adjustment. That meant someone was watching. That meant the system had noticed. Gemstone pulsed again. I wrapped it in cloth and hid it under 3 layers of broken shields. My hands would not stop shaking. That night, I could not sleep. I sat in the corner of the barracks they assigned to dungeon workers and stared at my status plate, the one the guards gave me on my second day. It still said F rank, still said item sorting, but the text flickered once when I tilted it toward the light. The next morning, the quartermaster called me to his desk. His face was unreadable. You have been here 8 days. The storage room is cleaner than it has been in 2 years. I said nothing. He slid a piece of parchment across the desk. Inventory supervisor wants to see you. 3rd floor. Do not keep him waiting. I took the parchment. My pulse hammered. I walked out of the storage room and up 2 flights of stairs I had never been allowed to climb. The 3rd floor was cleaner, brighter. The walls were carved stone instead of rough rock. Clerks in gray robes moved between desks stacked with ledgers. Found the supervisor's office at the end of the hall. The door was open. A man in fine blue robes sat behind a polished wooden desk. He looked up when I entered. Darren Moss, F-rank item sorter. I nodded. He tapped a ledger in front of him. Your output has been noted. 8 days. 43% increase in salvage recovery. 0 sorting errors. 0 complaints. He closed the ledger. You are being reassigned. Storage sub-level 2. Double the space. Triple the workload. Your task quota increases to 600 items per week. He slid a new status plate across the desk. Congratulations. You are now E-rank. I picked up the plate. The text glowed faint blue. Darren Moss, E-rank contractor, skill advanced item sorting. Advanced. The word burned. I looked up at the supervisor. He was already writing something else. Dismissed. I walked out. My legs felt numb. I stared at the new plate. E-rank. That meant more access, more loot, more visibility. I should have felt relieved, but the system notification flickered again at the edge of my vision. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see 2 words. Observation logged. Then it vanished. I gripped the status plate hard enough to crack it. Someone was watching, and I had no idea if they wanted to help me or bury me. I held the E-rank status plate in my hand and stared at the words glowing faint blue across its surface. Advanced item sorting. My chest still felt tight from the walk down from the 3rd floor. My legs still felt numb. The supervisor's voice echoed in my head. Congratulations! Like he had done me a favor. I walked back down to sub-level 3. Tobias was waiting near the water barrel. His eyes locked onto the plate in my hand. He read it once, then again. His face went pale. They promoted you. I nodded. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the corner where we hid the high-value items. That is worse. You understand that is worse, right? I pulled my arm back. It means more access, more loot, more it means they are watching you now. The system notification flickered at the edge of my vision again, just for half a second. Observation logged, then it vanished. My stomach twisted. Tobias was still talking. E-rank contractors get logged. Every item you touch gets recorded. Every salvage count gets reported to the trade authority. That means Lord Valen sees your numbers. I felt the weight of the spatial pouch against my 8,000 gold in 8 days. All from trash nobody wanted. All sold through black market channels with no guild record. How long before he notices the discrepancy? Tobias laughed. It sounded broken. He already noticed. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel before I could respond. Multiple sets. Heavy boots. Not workers. I turned toward the entrance. 3 men in dark gray uniforms stepped into the storage room. Guild enforcement, silver pins on their collars, swords at their hips. The one in front held a ledger. Darren Moss, E-rank contractor. I said nothing. He opened the ledger and read from it without looking up. Dungeon Trade Authority has flagged your salvage output for review. 8 days. 43% recovery increase. 0 processing errors. Statistical anomaly detected. He finally looked at me. Lord Valencross, Royal Dungeon Trademaster, has requested your presence, 3rd floor, Administration Wing. You are to report immediately. My pulse hammered. Tobias took 1 step back. The enforcer's eyes flicked toward him. You. Janitor, inventory sweep of this room. Full audit. Submit results by end of shift. Tobias nodded. His hands shook. The enforcer turned back to me. Move! They walked me out of the storage room and up 3 flights of stairs. Not the ones I took earlier. A different route. Wider halls, polished stone floors, tapestries on the walls showing dungeon conquest scenes, adventurers in shining armor, nobles holding glowing weapons, no workers, no janitors, no trash sorters. We stopped in front of a door carved from black wood. Gold inlay traced the edges. One enforcer knocked twice. A voice from inside answered. Enter. The door opened. The room beyond was twice the size of the entire storage sublevel. Bookshelves lined the walls. A massive desk sat near the far window. Maps covered every surface. Dungeon floor layouts. Trade routes. Loot distribution grids. A man stood behind the desk. Tall, maybe 40, dark hair, expensive blue robes with gold trim. A silver chain hung around his neck with a pendant shaped like a dungeon gate. Lord Valencross. He did not look up. He was reading a parchment covered in numbers. Enforcers stepped aside. I stood alone in the center of the room. Valen set the parchment down and finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, analytical, the same look my old manager used to give damaged freight. Darren Moss, the summoning accident. I said nothing. He walked around the desk and stopped 5 feet away. He was taller than me, broader. Everything about him radiated control. 8 days in dungeon storage, 43% salvage recovery increase. You processed 612 items. You separated trash from salvage with 0 errors. You identified materials the quartermaster had labeled disposal for 2 years. He tilted his head. How? I kept my face blank. I did my job. He smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Your job is F-rank item sorting. The skill allows basic categorization. Separate metal from wood, cloth from bone. It does not allow material grade identification. It does not allow component recognition. It does not allow appraisal. He stepped closer. Yet somehow, in 8 days, you identified and removed 47 items from the disposal queue that my C-rank appraisers had already processed. 12 of those items were later sold through unofficial channels. Total market value approximately 70,000 gold. My chest went cold. He knew, not suspected, knew. Valen pulled a folded parchment from his robe and opened it. A list. Names, dates, transaction values. Every sale Tobias and I made through the black market merchants. Every item, every coin. Dungeon loot belongs to the crown. All salvage, all materials, all monster drops. Selling unlogged items is theft. Theft from the royal dungeon carries a mandatory sentence of 10 years labor or immediate exile. He folded the parchment and tucked it back into his robe. But I am a practical man. You clearly possess a skill more valuable than your status plate indicates. That interests me. He walked back toward his desk. I am offering you a choice. You may continue your work under official guild supervision. All items you identify will be logged. All sales will be processed through proper channels. You will receive a standard contractor fee of 5% net value. In exchange, I will overlook your previous violations. He sat down and picked up a quill. Or you may refuse, in which case, I will submit this ledger to the Crown Trade Court, and you will be in a labor camp by sunset. I stared at him. 5%. 70,000 gold became 3,500. Every item I found, every reassembled component, every misappraised artifact, all of it funneled back into the same system that labeled me worthless. What happens to the other 95%? Valen did not look up. Crown taxes, guild processing fees, noble house distribution rights, administrative overhead, standard procedure, standard. The word tasted like rust. I thought about the throne room, the nobles laughing, the king calling me a mistake. I thought about my old manager. About 15 years of optimized inventory nobody valued until it collapsed. I looked past Valen toward the maps on his desk. Loot distribution grids. I could see the pattern even from here. Every dungeon floor funneled materials toward noble house territories. Every high-grade item got routed through guild appraisers who answered to men like Valen. Every F-rank worker, every E-rank contractor, every dismissed adventurer stayed at the bottom because the system was designed to keep them there. Valen set the quill down. I need your answer. The system notification flickered again, brighter this time, long enough for me to read 3 full lines. Skill rank adjustment complete. Classification unregistered, economic manipulation, authority review pending. The window vanished. Valen's eyes narrowed. He had not seen it, but he saw my expression change. What did you just see? I pulled my face blank again. Nothing. He stood up slowly. You have 24 hours. Report to sublevel 2 and begin official contractor duties under guild observation, or refuse and face the court. Choose carefully. The enforcers moved toward me. One opened the door. I walked out. My hands shook. My pulse hammered so hard I could hear it. He escorted me back down to sublevel 3 and left without another word. Tobias was gone. The storage room was empty. Every pile I had sorted, every crate I had organized, every hidden corner where I stashed high-value items, all of it had been moved, cleaned, audited. A single piece of parchment sat on the quartermaster's desk. Inventory discrepancy. 63 items unaccounted for. Investigation opened. I crumpled the parchment in my fist. 63 items. The exact number I had separated and hidden. Valen had not just known about the sales. He had tracked every single piece. I sat down on the floor and leaned against the wall. My chest felt tight, not from fear, from something sharper, something older. I thought about the supervisor's office, about the new status plate, E rank, advanced item sorting, a promotion designed to chain me. I thought about Valen's offer, 5%, standard procedure, a cage built from contracts and guild authority and noble distribution rights. The same system that summoned me by accident and threw me into the trash because I could not swing a sword. 24 hours. Report or refuse. Work under observation or face exile. It was not a choice. It was a leash. I pulled the spatial pouch from my shirt, the one Tobias bought with his first cut. I opened it and looked inside. Gold coins. Enough to live for a year. Enough to run. Enough to disappear into whatever passed for a frontier in this world. But running meant the system won. Running meant Valen kept his monopoly. Running meant every F-rank worker, every dismissed adventurer, every kid assigned to the disposal pile stayed exactly where the nobles wanted them. I closed the pouch, stood up, walked toward the empty shelves. My hands were not shaking anymore. My pulse had steadied. The system notification flickered one last time. Observation period active. I smiled. Let them watch. 24 hours. Valen wanted me to choose between his leash or his court. But he made one mistake. He thought item sorting was my only skill. He thought logistics workers were disposable. He thought the trash pile did not matter. I had identified 63 items in 8 days. I knew where 70% of the dungeon's misappraised loot was buried. I knew which noble appraisers were falsifying grades. I knew which merchants would pay black market rates. I knew the entire supply chain from dungeon drop to noble vault. And Valen just gave me 24 hours of freedom before the leash locked. I walked out of the storage room, not toward sub-level 2, toward the lower worker barracks, toward the janitors and the cooks and the haulers and every other forgotten contractor the system labeled worthless. I needed 12 people. I needed 3 carts. I needed 1 night. Valen controlled the dungeon loot monopoly because nobody challenged the appraisal system, because adventurers trusted guild grades, because workers believed the trash pile was actually trash, because the foundation was invisible. I spent 15 years optimizing inventory nobody noticed. This time I would make it expensive to ignore. I walked through the worker barracks with my pulse steady and my hands loose at my sides, the spatial pouch pressed against my ribs. 68,000 gold, 24 hours, 12 people, 3 carts, 1 night to build something Valen could not bury. Tobias found me first. He was sitting on a crate near the kitchens with his head in his hands. He saw me, he stood up too fast. They audited everything. They found the hidden corners. They know about the sales. I nodded. I know. His face went pale. Then why are you still here? You should be halfway to the frontier by now. I pulled the spatial pouch out and set it on the crate between us. How many workers down here hate Valen? Tobias stared at the pouch, then at me. All of them. I smiled. Good. I need introductions. It took 4 hours to gather the right people. Not the loudest, not the angriest. The ones who noticed things. The hauler who knew which carts got inspected and which got waved through. The cook who tracked noble meal orders and knew when Valen left the dungeon. The records clerk who filed disposal manifests and saw which appraisers signed off on trash labels. The night shift janitor who cleaned the third-floor offices and knew where Valen kept his ledgers. I stood in the center of the barracks storage room with 11 workers around me. Tobias leaned against the wall near the door. I pulled out a piece of parchment and drew a rough map of the dungeon's sub-level layout. Valen controls the loot monopoly because adventurers trust guild appraisals. 90% of dungeon drops never get appraised. They get sorted by F-rank workers who follow disposal manifests written by noble appraisers who benefit from keeping loot off the market. I tapped the disposal sublevel on the map. We are going to sort it correctly, one of the haulers spoke up. Older man, scarred hands. You want us to steal from the disposal queue? I shook my head. I want you to do your jobs. Touch nothing valuable. Move nothing logged. Just bring me the items marked for disposal that nobody else wants. The records clerk frowned. Why? Because my skill can see what their appraisals miss. And I am going to prove Valen has been throwing away more gold than the kingdom earns in taxes. Tobias pushed off the wall. If Valen catches us, we are dead. I looked at him. He already caught us. Now we make it loud enough that he cannot bury it. The cook spoke next. Younger, nervous. What do we get? I opened the spatial pouch and pulled out 2,000 gold. Set it on the table. Equal split, minus operating costs. Plus I pay off any labor debt you are carrying. Room went silent. The hauler stared at the gold. How much are you planning to move? I thought about the manifests I had read. About the disposal queue that processed 600 items per week across 4 sublevels. About the fact that my skill had identified value in 43% of the trash I touched. Enough to break the cartel. They agreed. All 11. We worked through the night. I stayed in the barracks while the haulers brought carts of disposal marked items through the side access tunnels the guards never patrolled. The records clerk falsified the manifest to show standard trash processing. The cook tracked Valen's schedule and gave us 4-hour windows when enforcement was off shift. I touched everything. My hands moved across broken swords and cracked potions and monster bones nobody wanted. The blue windows opened faster now. The system had stopped flickering. Every item showed grade and value and origin without delay. 40% was real trash, corroded beyond repair. No value. I marked those for actual disposal, but 60% glowed. Green for uncommon, blue for rare, purple for epic. I found 3 more legendary components. I found a stack of monster cores labeled low grade that my skill read as rare purity. I found 16 potions marked expired that were actually uncommon healing elixirs with stable shelf life. By dawn, we had processed 300 appraised value, 82,000 gold. Total disposal manifest value, 400 gold. I sent Tobias to the black market merchant with the first batch. 50 uncommon grade items. Clean. No guild marks. No noble seals. He came back 6 hours later with 14,000 gold and a message. The merchant wants to know how much more you have. I looked at the 250 items still waiting, enough to flood the market. We moved the second batch that night. Monster cores. Epic grade weapon fragments. Tobias knew a second merchant. Then a third. The money came back in waves. 14,000, 22,000, 18,000. I paid the workers first. Equal shares. 2,000 gold each for 3 nights of hauling. The hauler with the scarred hands stared at the coins like they were cursed. I have been working disposal for 8 years. I never made more than 30 gold a month. I handed him another stack. That is because the appraisers lied. On the 4th day, the dungeon's potion prices dropped. Not by much, just enough to notice. Adventurers started asking why rare-grade healing elixirs were selling for half the guild rate at the mercantile district. Guild sent auditors to the merchant stalls. The merchant shrugged and said supply increased. One C-rank appraiser lingered longer than the others. A woman named Mira Fenwick who kept checking my disposal manifests instead of the merchant tables. The auditors checked the dungeon loot logs. The logs showed normal output. No discrepancies, no flags, because we had not touched a single logged item. Everything we moved was marked for disposal. Trash. Worthless. The kind of loot the guild did not bother tracking. On the 5th day, Mira showed up at the barracks. She found me in the storage room counting coins into pouches. Her face was pale. The guild is investigating a black market loot surge. Valen thinks someone is smuggling dungeon drops through the lower tunnels. I kept counting. Is he right? She stepped closer. Darren, 53 rare grade items hit the open market in 4 days. The guild appraisal logs show 0 rare drops processed through official channels this week. That means someone is bypassing the system. I looked up at her. or the system is broken. Her jaw tightened. What did you do? I handed her a potion bottle. Cracked glass, faded label. Disposal manifest stamp on the side. She turned it over in her hands. This was marked for trash. I nodded. Use your skill. She activated her appraisal. The air around the bottle shimmered faintly. Her eyes widened. This is rare grade, 92% purity. Market value 600 gold. I pulled out the disposal manifest. Showed her the appraiser's signature at the bottom. A name she recognized. One of Valen's senior guild appraisers. He signed off on 300 items last month. Labeled all of them trash. I checked 40. 26 were rare or higher. Mira set the bottle down slowly. That is fraud. I smiled. That is the system. She looked at me for a long moment, then at the manifest, then back at me. If Valen finds out you have proof, he will kill you. I folded the manifest and tucked it into my shirt. He has to catch me first. She left without another word. I did not know if she would report me. I did not know whose side she was on, but I knew she had seen the signature, and I knew she understood what it meant. On the 6th day, Lord Valen sent enforcers to the disposal sublevels. They swept every room, checked every cart, inspected every manifest. They found nothing, because we had already moved everything, because the records matched, because the trash we removed was legally marked for destruction. The lead enforcer reported back to Valen that the disposal workers were processing normally. No contraband, no smuggling, no irregularities. I know because the records clerk told me. She had been filing his reports for 2 years. She knew his handwriting. Valen did not believe it. He sent a second team, then a third. They audited the merchant district, checked the black market stalls, interviewed the sellers. The merchant said the loot came from independent adventurers. No guild stamps, no dungeon marks, legal salvage. The guild could not prove otherwise, because we had been careful, because Tobias knew which merchants kept clean books, because the items had been labeled disposal before we ever touched them. On the 7th day, the dungeon's rare-grade equipment prices dropped 15%. Adventurers stopped buying from the guild stores. They went to the independent merchants instead. The guild lost 40,000 gold in sales. Valen held an emergency meeting with the noble appraisers. The records clerk listened through the door. He knows someone is undermining the cartel. He just does not know who. I handed her 3,000 gold. Keep listening. That night, I found something that made my chest go cold. A small crystal sphere buried in a disposal crate marked Monster Waste. The moment I touched it, the system window appeared. Item Dungeon Registry Node. Grade Mythic. Origin Royal Dungeon Core Floor Unknown. Condition Active. Function. Records all loot distribution data for floors 115. Appraisal value priceless. I stared at the text. Dungeon Registry Node. That meant this sphere was tracking every item that dropped in the upper dungeon floors. That meant it knew exactly how much loot Valen's appraisers were mislabeling. That meant it had proof. A second window appeared, smaller, tucked in the corner. Registry link detected. Accessing historical data. The sphere pulsed once in my hand, then a third window opened. A list. Thousands of entries. Item names, drop dates, appraisal grades, disposal authorizations. I scrolled through the first 50. Every single one showed a mismatch. Rare grade items labeled common, items labeled trash, legendary components labeled scrap. The list went back 3 years. The same appraiser signatures appeared over and over. All of them worked for Valen. I wrapped the sphere in cloth and hid it under my shirt. My hands shook. This was not just proof. This was a full audit trail. This was enough to dismantle the entire noble loot monopoly. The next morning, Valen himself came to the disposal sublevel. No enforcers, no guards, just him. He walked into the storage room where I was sorting a fresh cart of trash. His face was calm. His eyes were not. You have been busy. I kept sorting. Just doing my job. He stepped closer. 14 nights ago, you were assigned to this sublevel as punishment labor. Yesterday, the dungeon's equipment market lost 60,000 gold in projected revenue. Today, I received a report that someone has been processing disposal items faster than the manifests should allow. I touched a cracked helmet. The window appeared. Common grade? No value. I tossed it into the disposal cart. Sounds like someone is working hard. Valen's jaw tightened. I know it is you. I looked up at him. Prove it. His hand moved toward the sword at his belt, then stopped. He was thinking, calculating. If he killed me here, the workers would see. If he arrested me without evidence, I could appeal. If he accused me publicly, I could show the manifests. The clean records, the legal disposal authorizations. He pulled his hand back. You think you are clever. You think because you found a few mislabeled items you can challenge the system. But you are still an F-rank worker in a kingdom that does not value trash sorters. I smiled. Then you have nothing to worry about. He turned and walked toward the door, stopped, looked back. 24 hours. That was my offer. The time is up. Report to Sublevel 2 for guild observation, or I submit your case to the Crown Court. I did not answer. He left. The moment his footsteps faded, Tobias came out from behind a crate where he had been hiding. He is going to kill you. I pulled the registry sphere out from under my shirt. Not if I break him first. That night I met with all 11 workers in the barracks. I showed them the sphere, showed them the data, showed them 3 years of falsified appraisals signed by Valen's guild. This is proof. Proof that the nobles have been stealing from the kingdom's dungeon taxes. Proof that every F-rank worker, every dismissed adventurer, every commoner who trusted the guild appraisal system got robbed. The hauler with the scarred hands stared at the sphere. What are you going to do with it? I looked at Tobias, then at Mira, who had been standing quietly near the door. She had not said a word since she arrived, but she had not left either. I am going to make it public. Mira stepped forward. If you submit that to the Crown Court, Valen will have you killed before the hearing. I nodded. I know. Then what? I smiled. I am not submitting it to the court. I am submitting it to the Royal Treasury Auditor, the one who answers directly to the king, the one Valen does not control. Her eyes widened. That is treason against the trade authority. I held up the sphere. This is theft against the crown? She stared at me, then at the sphere, then back at me. She pulled a folded parchment from her coat and set it on the table. Then you will need this. I opened it. An official guild appraisal report, signed by Mira Fenwick, C-rank appraiser. It listed 40 items I had processed through the disposal queue. Everyone showed a grade mismatch between the original noble appraisal and her independent review. She had been tracking my work, verifying it, building evidence. I looked at her. You are risking your license. She met my eyes. I am risking it on something that matters. I sent the registry sphere and Mira's report to the Royal Treasury that night. The records clerk knew a courier who owed her a favor. The package arrived at the capital by morning. 2 days later, a royal auditor arrived at the dungeon. Not guild enforcement, crown authority. He walked past Valen's office without stopping, walked past the guild checkpoints without asking permission, walked straight into the disposal sublevel, and asked for Darren Moss. I met him in the storage room. He was older, gray hair, expensive robes with the king's seal embroidered on the chest. He looked at me once, then at the sorted piles, then at the workers standing quietly near the walls. You sent this? He held up the registry sphere. It pulsed faintly in his hand. I nodded. He turned the sphere over slowly. Do you understand what this contains? Yes. He looked at me again. His expression was unreadable. The Crown Treasury has been investigating dungeon tax discrepancies for 6 months. We suspected noble manipulation but lacked proof. This sphere contains data that implicates 4 guild appraisers, 2 trade officials, and 1 royal dungeon trade master in systematic loot falsification totaling approximately 800,000 gold in lost tax revenue. 800,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. The auditor pulled a rolled parchment from his coat and handed it to me. By order of the Crown Treasury, you are hereby recognized as an official dungeon asset auditor. Your findings will be submitted as evidence in the upcoming Trade Authority review. You will be compensated 10% of recovered tax value. I stared at the parchment. D rank, official auditor, 10% of 800,000 gold. The auditor turned toward the door, stopped, looked back. Lord Valencross has been placed under financial review. He is not permitted to interfere with your work or access disposal records until the investigation concludes. He left. The workers stood in silence. Tobias laughed once. It sounded broken. You just destroyed him. I looked down at the parchment in my hands, at the crown seal stamped in red wax at the bottom. No, I just made him visible. That night I returned to my bunk in the worker barracks. My body ached. My head throbbed. I had not slept in 3 days. I lay down and closed my eyes. The system notification appeared immediately. Status update rank increased to D skill classification under review. Warning, hostile observation detected. The last line made my skin prickle. Hostile observation. That meant someone else was watching. Someone who was not the crown. Someone who did not want me auditing dungeon loot. The notification flickered, then vanished. I tried to call it back. Nothing appeared. I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, not workers. I sat up. The door opened. A figure stood in the entrance, backlit by torchlight. I could not see their face. They spoke quietly. Lord Valen wants you to know he does not forget debts. The door closed. The footsteps faded. I sat in the dark and stared at the space where the figure had stood. My pulse hammered. My hands were steady. Valen had just lost 800,000 gold in his trade monopoly. The crown had recognized me as an official auditor. The workers had proof the system was broken. And somewhere in the dungeon, Valen was no longer smiling. I woke up to the sound of boots on stone. Too many boots. Too heavy. Not workers. Not janitors. Guards. I sat up in my bunk. The barracks door slammed open. 8 royal guards poured in wearing full plate armor. silver trim, crown seals. Not dungeon enforcement, palace authority. Behind them walked Lord Valen Cross. His face was calm. His eyes were not. He stopped 3 feet from my bunk. Darren Moss, by order of the Royal Trade Authority, you are under arrest for theft of Crown Dungeon assets, unlicensed loot redistribution, and economic sabotage against the kingdom's resource monopoly. The workers around me froze. Tobias stood near the far wall. His face went pale. I looked at Valen. I sorted trash, legal disposal items, signed manifests. Valen pulled a rolled parchment from his coat and threw it onto my bunk. You bypassed guild appraisal protocols. You sold dungeon loot through black market channels. You undermined crown tax collection by manipulating market prices. That is theft. That is treason. I picked up the parchment. Read it. Every sale, every merchant, every item Tobias and I moved. The seal was not Treasury red. It was Trade Authority black, which meant Valen had not broken the auditor's order. He had gone around it, authorized by the Trade Authority. Not the Crown Court. He had bypassed the investigation. 2 guards grabbed my arms and hauled me upright. My feet barely touched the floor. Valen stepped closer. Your little audit stunt delayed the review. It did not stop it. The Trade Authority supersedes Treasury investigations when dungeon security is threatened. And you, Darren Moss, are a threat. He signaled the guards. They dragged me toward the door. I saw Mira standing in the hallway. Her face was tight. She did not move, did not speak. I tried to catch her eye, but the guards yanked me forward. They hauled me through 3 corridors and up 2 flights of stairs. Not toward the administration wing, toward the dungeon gate, the main entrance, the public forum where adventurers gathered and merchants bid on loot. The forum was full. 50 adventurers, 20 merchants, a dozen guild officials. All of them stopped and turned when the guards dragged me into the center of the stone platform. Valen walked to the raised dais where the dungeon magistrate normally stood. He did not sit. He addressed the crowd. This man was summoned by accident. He was assigned disposal labor as an act of mercy. Instead, he stole from the crown. He undermined the guild appraisal system. He flooded the market with unlicensed loot and cost the kingdom 200,000 gold in projected tax revenue. The crowd murmured. Some adventurers looked angry, others looked confused. One merchant near the back smiled. Valen raised his voice. The Trade Authority has reviewed his case. The evidence is conclusive. Darren Moss will be stripped of his contractor status, his skill will be sealed, and he will serve 10 years' labor in the deep mines. He pulled a small crystal rod from his belt. Skill sealer. I had seen them used once before on a worker who stole from the loot carts. The rod glowed faint red. Valen walked toward me. My chest went cold. Skill sealed meant I could not touch anything without triggering champagne. Meant the system windows would burn instead of open. Meant every item I tried to appraise would feel like broken glass in my... Valen stopped in front of me, raised the rod. Then Tobias stepped onto the platform. He was shaking. His hands were empty. He looked at Valen. He did not steal anything. I was there. Every item we moved was marked for disposal. Legal manifests, signed by your appraisers. Valen did not turn. You were his accomplice. You will be charged separately. Tobias pulled a folded parchment from his shirt, held it up, then charged the appraisers too. Because I kept copies. The crowd went silent. Valen finally turned. His jaw tightened. What? Tobias unfolded the parchment. His voice was louder now. 3 years of disposal manifests. Every item marked trash, every signature. I filed them myself for 2 years before Darren arrived. I know which ones were wrong. He looked at the crowd. 60% of the items Lord Valen's appraisers labeled as trash were rare grade or higher. We did not steal from the crown. We caught the people who were. Valen's hand moved toward his sword, then stopped. The adventurers were watching. The merchants were watching. The guild officials were watching. He pulled his hand back. You have no authority to make that accusation. Tobias smiled. It looked broken. No, but the royal treasury does. Mira stepped onto the platform. She was holding the registry sphere, the mythic-grade dungeon node I had sent to the auditor. It pulsed faintly in her hands. She set it on the stone floor in the center of the forum. Then she activated her appraisal skill. The air above the sphere shimmered. A translucent blue screen appeared. Then another. Then 50 more. They filled the air above the platform like windows stacked on top of each other. Every screen showed a dungeon item. Every screen showed 2 grades. Original appraisal. True value. Every screen showed a mismatch. The crowd pressed forward. Adventurers read the closest screens. Merchants pulled out their own appraisal tools and compared. One guild official stepped onto the platform and stared at the data. His face went pale. This is 3 years of loot records. Mira nodded. 3 years of falsified appraisals. 800,000 gold in suppressed tax value. All signed by Trade Authority appraisers. She looked at Valen. All authorized by you. Valen's face stayed calm, but his hands shook. He turned toward the guards. Arrest her. Arrest both of them. This is falsified evidence submitted by a dismissed contractor. None of the guards moved. They were staring at the screens, at the numbers, at the signatures. One adventurer near the front shouted, "I sold a rare grade core last year. Your appraiser told me it was common, paid me 30 gold. Another voice joined. I brought in an epic sword fragment. Your guild labeled it scrap. The crowd shifted, not toward me, toward Valen. The energy changed. I felt it in my chest. The moment the foundation cracked, Valen raised his voice. This man is a criminal. He undermined the dungeon economy. He sold loot without guild authorization. That is theft, regardless of appraisal errors. Mira pulled a second parchment from her coat, held it up. He sold disposal items. Items your appraisers had already rejected. Items the crown had no legal claim to. That is salvage law. Section 42 of the Dungeon Trade Charter. She handed the parchment to the guild official on the platform. He read it. His face tightened. She is correct. Disposal items revert to salvage status after 14 days. Anyone can claim them. Valen's jaw clenched. He bypassed guild channels. The official looked at him. Because the guild channels were fraudulent. The crowd noise rose. Valen turned toward me. His hand dropped to his sword. This time he did not stop. He drew the blade halfway. The guards stepped forward, not toward me, toward him. Lord Valen, lower your weapon. He froze, stared at the guards, then at the crowd, then at the 50 screens still glowing above the registry sphere. His hand tightened on the hilt. Then the auditor walked onto the platform. The same gray-haired man from 2 days ago. He wore the king's seal on his chest. He looked at Valen, then at the sphere, then at me. By order of the Crown Treasury, Lord Valen Cross is suspended from trade authority duties pending full investigation. His assets are frozen. His loot access is revoked. He turned to the guards. Escort him to the capital for formal review. Valen's face went white. He looked at me. His voice dropped. You do not understand what you have done. The trade authority is not one man. It is a system. You cannot break a system by exposing one piece. I met his eyes. You are right. I cannot break it, but I can sort it. The guards moved toward him, dropped his sword. It clattered on the stone. They took his arms and led him off the platform. He did not resist. He just stared at me the whole way, not with anger, with something colder. The crowd began shouting, questions, accusations, demands for refunds. The guild official raised his hands and called for order. Mira deactivated her skill. The screens vanished. She looked at me. That was reckless. I smiled. That was necessary. Tobias walked over. He was still shaking. He handed me the manifests. I kept every one, just in case. I took them. My hands were steady now. My pulse had slowed. I looked at the registry sphere still glowing on the platform, at the crowd still pressed forward, at the adventurers demanding answers, at the merchants recalculating their losses. The system was not broken yet. Valen was one man. The trade authority was 50 noble houses with 50 appraisers who answered to 50 lords who controlled 50 dungeon gates. But the foundation was cracked. The numbers were public. The workers had seen. I turned toward the dungeon entrance, toward the sublevels, toward the disposal rooms and sorting halls and trash piles nobody wanted. My chest felt light. My head felt clear. Valen thought I was trying to break the system. He was wrong. I was reorganizing it. One mislabeled item at a time, one falsified manifest at a time, one exposed signature at a time. I walked off the platform. Mira followed, then Tobias. The crowd parted. Some adventurers nodded. Some merchants watched. One guild official stopped me. What happens now? I looked back at the glowing registry sphere. Now we sort the rest. I walked off the platform, and the crowd noise followed me like a wave. Adventurers shouting, merchants demanding refunds, guild officials trying to restore order. But I was not listening anymore. My eyes locked onto something nobody else was watching. Valen's personal loot cart. It sat against the wall near the magistrate's dais. Black iron frame, crown seal stamped on the side. The kind of cart reserved for trade authority officials transporting high-value dungeon drops. The kind nobody was allowed to inspect without authorization. I changed direction, walked toward it. Mira saw me move and her eyes went wide. Darren, do not! I pressed my hand against the nearest item, a cloth-wrapped bundle sitting on top. The system window exploded across my vision. Bright gold, mythic grade glow. Item celestial blade fragment, grade divine. Material starforged platinum, 99% purity. Origin, Royal Dungeon, floor 38. Appraisal value 400,000 gold. Disposal authorization falsified. My breath caught. Divine grade, floor 38. Falsified disposal authorization. I touched the second item, another window. Divine grade monster core. Falsified manifest. I touched the third. Epic grade spatial artifact. Stolen dungeon record. Every single item in Valen's cart was labeled as trash in the official ledgers. Every single one was worth more than most adventurers earned in a lifetime. I activated my skill fully. Not just identification. Full sorting protocol. Every item in the cart. The blue windows appeared all at once, 23 screens. They filled the air above the cart like a wall of light. Every screen showed 2 grades. Official appraisal. Common, disposal approved. True value, divine, epic, legendary. The crowd went silent. Every eye turned toward the glowing screens, toward the cart, toward the crown seal stamped on its side. One adventurer stepped closer. Read the nearest window. His face went white. That is a divine grade drop. The guild told us nothing divine had been found in 6 months. Another voice joined. That core is from floor 30. We are not allowed past floor 20. Mira walked toward the cart. She activated her appraisal skill. The air shimmered. Her independent assessment appeared alongside my windows. Every grade matched. Every value confirmed. She looked at the crowd. These items were logged as disposal trash. They were supposed to be destroyed. Lord Valen was transporting them under crown authority. A guild official pushed through the crowd, stared at the screens, pulled out his own ledger, checked the manifest numbers. His hands started shaking. These disposal codes are signed by trade authority appraisers, 8 different signatures, all authorized by Lord Valen Cross. He looked up at the guards still holding Valen at the edge of the platform. This is not theft. This is systematic embezzlement of Crown Dungeon resources. Valen jerked forward. The guards held him. His voice was sharp. Those appraisals were legitimate. Disposal items are trade authority jurisdiction. This man has no legal standing to... I pulled the registry sphere from Mira's hands, held it up, activated my sorting skill on the sphere itself. A new window appeared, larger, brighter. It showed a full audit trail. 3 years of loot records. 800,000 gold in suppressed value. Divine grade items logged as trash. All marked for disposal. All transported by Valen's personal carts. All sold through private noble channels with no crown tax. The window expanded. Showed the destination records. Noble house vaults. Private collections. 12 names. All connected to the Trade Authority Council. All receiving divine grade loot marked as garbage. The crowd pressed forward. The adventurers were not shouting anymore. They were reading, calculating, realizing how much had been stolen from them, from the kingdom, from the system they trusted. One merchant grabbed the guild official's arm. I submitted a divine grade drop 2 years ago. Your appraiser told me it was cursed, paid me 50 gold and disposed of it. The official checked his ledger, found the entry. His face went gray. That item is listed here, transported by Lord Valen, sold to House Corinth for 300,000 gold. The crowd erupted, not with questions, with rage. Adventurers surged toward the platform. The guards stepped between them and Valen. The auditor raised his hand. Clear the forum. This is now a crown investigation. Nobody moved. The energy had shifted past authority, past control. I felt it in my chest. The moment the foundation did not just crack, the moment it shattered. Valen's voice cut through the noise. Cold, controlled. You think this changes anything? You think exposing me dismantles the system? The trade authority is 50 noble houses, 12 guild masters, 200 appraisers. I am one man. They will replace me before sunset. I met his eyes. You are right. They will replace you, but they cannot replace the numbers. I touched the registry sphere again. Focused. The system responded. A new window appeared, not showing loot records, showing economic projection data, market value fluctuations, tax revenue loss, dungeon access inequality. The numbers scrolled past. 3 years of suppressed commoner advancement. 800 adventurers denied fair appraisals. 42 divine grade items that could have funded kingdom infrastructure. All stolen, all hidden, all enabled by a system that treated F-rank skills as disposable. The final line appeared in bright red text. Estimated total economic damage. 1,200, 0 gold. 1.2 million gold. The number hung in the air like a sentence. The auditor stepped forward, took the sphere from my hands. His expression was unreadable. By order of the Crown Treasury, all Trade Authority appraisal protocols are suspended pending full system audit. All dungeon loot processing will be independently verified. All disposal authorizations will be reviewed. He turned toward Valen. Lord Valen Cross, you are under arrest for embezzlement, tax fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the crown. Your assets are seized. Your title is revoked. Valen did not resist. He just stared at me. His voice dropped. You destroyed the only system that kept this kingdom's dungeon economy stable. Without trade authority control, the market will collapse. Adventurers will hoard loot. Merchants will price gouge. The nobility will lose their funding base. You did not fix anything. You broke it. I stepped closer. Good. It needed to break. The guards led him away. This time he did not look back. The crowd began to disperse. Adventurers argued, merchants calculated. Guild officials huddled near the dais trying to decide what came next. Mira walked over. Her face was pale. What happens now? I looked at the cart, at the 23 divine grade items still glowing under my system windows, at the registry sphere pulsing in the auditor's hands, at the workers standing quietly near the tunnel entrance, watching, waiting. Now we rebuild it correctly. The auditor turned toward me. The crown requires an interim dungeon inventory authority, someone who understands the system, someone the workers trust. He held out a rolled parchment. I took it, unrolled it, read the text. By order of the Crown Treasury, Darren Moss is hereby appointed Royal Dungeon Inventory Master, Rank B, Authority Full, Loot Classification and Distribution Oversight, Jurisdiction All Royal Dungeon Floors. A smaller line appeared beneath it. Summoning debt cleared by Crown Order. Royal Appointment, Full Authority. I stared at the words. My hands were steady. My pulse was calm. I thought about the throne room, about the nobles laughing, about the king calling me a mistake. I looked at Tobias. He was crying, not from fear, from something else. I looked at Mira. She was smiling. I looked at the workers. They were not bowing. They were standing, watching, recognizing. I rolled the parchment and tucked it into my shirt. My chest felt lighter than it had in 15 years. But my ribs ached. My head throbbed. Blood still crusted under my nose from overusing my skill. My hands shook when I lowered them. The victory cost something. It always did. I had broken the system that kept me alive, destroyed the authority that gave me access, made enemies of every noble house that profited from the old structure. But I had also proven that F rank was never the problem. The appraisal system was. And now I had the authority to rewrite it. The auditor gestured toward the registry sphere. You have 3 days to submit a new loot processing protocol. The Crown expects full transparency. I nodded. He left. The forum slowly emptied. Mira stayed. Tobias stayed. The workers stayed. I walked back toward the platform, picked up the registry sphere. It pulsed warm in my hands. A system notification appeared. Status update rank increased to B. Skill evolution unlocked. Economic restructuring protocol. The window flickered, then vanished. I stared at the empty air where it had been. Economic restructuring protocol. That meant my skill had evolved past identification, past sorting, into something that could reshape how entire markets functioned. I looked at the dungeon entrance, at the sublevels below, at the thousands of items still buried in disposal queues, at the workers still cleaning floors, at the adventurers still trusting broken appraisals. Valen was right about one thing. I had broken the system. But systems built on theft deserved to break. I turned toward Mira and Tobias. Get me every disposal manifest from the last 5 years, every appraiser's signature, every falsified grade. We are going to sort all of it. Tobias laughed. That is 10,000 items. I smiled. Then we better start now. But not that night. That night, the dungeon finally went quiet. Crowd noise faded behind me. The forum emptied slowly. Adventurers still arguing. Merchants still calculating. Guild officials still trying to understand what came next. I stood near the magistrate's dais and watched them leave. My ribs ached. My head throbbed. Blood had dried under my nose. My hands shook when I lowered them to my Mira walked over. She did not say anything, just stood beside me and looked at the cart, at the 23 divine grade items still glowing under my system windows. Tobias sat on the platform steps. His face was pale. He was holding the manifests like they might disappear. The auditor had left the registry sphere on the dais. It pulsed faintly in the torchlight. I picked it up. The weight felt heavier than it should, not because of the crystal, because of what it represented. 3 years of 100,000 gold. 42 divine grade items buried in trash. All visible now. All recorded. I looked at my hands. They were covered in dust and dried blood and something sticky from the loot cart. 15 years of warehouse work left calluses. This world had erased them. But the instincts remained. The ability to see the foundation, to sort the chaos, to reorganize what everyone else ignored. The parchment pressed against my ribs. Royal Dungeon Inventory Master, full authority. I pulled it out and unrolled it again. Read the king's seal at the bottom. My chest felt lighter, but my legs were numb. I had not slept in 3 days, had not eaten since yesterday. My body was breaking from overusing a skill the system still did not fully understand. Tobias finally spoke. His voice was quiet. What do we do now? I looked at the dungeon entrance, at the sublevels below, at the disposal rooms and sorting halls and trash piles that still held 10,000 Mia's appraised items. The workers who had stayed, who had sorted beside me, who had risked everything because they believed the numbers. I folded the parchment and tucked it back into my shirt. We billed it correctly. 3 days later, I stood in the rebuilt sorting hall on sublevel 2. The walls were clean. The shelves were labeled. Every item had a zone. Every pile had a system. Blue system windows floated above each section showing real-time appraisal data. Commoner adventurers moved through the aisles with carts. Workers guided them. Mira verified grades at the appraisal station near the entrance. Tobias supervised the storage teams. I sat at the center desk surrounded by manifests and ledgers and registry nodes. A line of adventurers waited outside. Some held broken swords. Some held cracked cores. Some held trash they hoped was treasure. I touched each item. The windows appeared. Most were common. Some were rare. One was divine. The system that dismissed me no longer controlled the foundation. The nobles who laughed no longer controlled the loot. The appraisers who lied no longer controlled the grades. I was not a hero. I was not a warrior. I was an inventory manager who died under a collapsed pallet and woke up in a world that needed sorting. For once, I was not replaceable.